Hello and welcome to Brightsmith's Women in Mobility series. Today I'm joined by the lovely Georgie Yexley of Beryl. She is their head of growth and is going to tell us a little bit about herself.
Great, thanks Jenny, and thanks for having me, by the way. I feel so honoured to kind of join this series with you.
Our pleasure.
Cheers. So just a little bit about me then. So I started my career in China. So I went over there in, I think it was 2014. So I was there for about 5.5 years, working in tech, working in high growth companies. And I was freelancing at a certain point when Mobike first came into China and started that kind of free floating micro mobility boom, closely followed by OFO. And then obviously we saw how that expanded across the world. So I was actually just kind of strolling down the street one day and saw the first Mobike that I saw on the street. I was like, sure, I've seen another one of those bikes. Is everyone buying the same bike or what's going on? And slowly uncovered that this kind of new service was coming into town. And I was looking for maybe like a part-time gig or another freelance project to take on because I had finished one project. And a friend of mine kind of just passed me over a job description to join the Mobike International Expansion team. So this was a few years ago now, but right at the cusp of when Mobike went international, did the first overseas launch in Singapore. I joined the team. So I was probably, I think it was team member number 4 at the kind of boom of that international expansion, and was with them for a couple of years up until coming back to the UK a year ago and joining Beryl Bikes, who I just felt are approaching this space in exactly the way that I want to, and have seen what's happened in terms of the boom of the free floating model internationally, the pros, the cons, you know, all the swings and roundabouts that have come with that huge boom. And was able to just find that affinity with Beryl Bikes and wanted to move back home, come back to London, and did that all just in the nick of time to be back and really settled and join all of this really amazing expansion that's now happened at Beryl ahead of this pandemic that we now find ourselves in. So yeah, I think that's like a little bit of background as to what's brought me up to today and being head of growth at Beryl and working with the team there.
Wonderful. And going into the topic of today, which is women in mobility, and something we have chatted at length about before. Why is it that you feel we need more entrepreneurial female voices in mobility?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting question because we actually have some really amazing female entrepreneurs in micromobility that maybe don't get as much recognition or there's not as much awareness. I think, you know, I mentioned Mobike at the top of the call. Mobike's female founded. There are a huge amount of senior women in that business that I don't think we're necessarily highlighted. I think most people don't know that Mobike is female founded, and that business is, I think, the fastest to reach unicorn status ever. So just that recognition of that accolade was achieved by a woman. I think we should be talking more about that. And then with that, hopefully, you know, that recognition of the people that do exist in this space will help to bring more in. Obviously, we are providing a service that is for the general public, and generally about 50% of the general public are women. So it's a good idea to have people who understand what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be in the world and need transportation, and then carry that through to how you actually build the business. And then, you know, really on a very direct level, you know, board members, investors pay attention because it's just facts that if you have more women on your team or on your board of directors, there's a lot of research that shows your business will outperform your competitors if you have a better balance with gender, and not just gender but broader diversity. You know, if we take looking at the cycling industry, the tech industry, all the places that micromobility intersects, they're all really male dominated, but they're also really white male dominated. And if you bring in intersectionality, it gets even, you know, poorer in terms of representation in the business. we would go a long way by diversifying our workforce, bringing more people in. And, you know, some of that is recognizing the people who are in it and doing the work right now, but it's also really taking stock and making sure that we're understanding why diversity within gender and everything else is valuable to the business.
I couldn't agree more.
I could talk 5 hours, to be honest. Like, there's a huge amount of research about it, and I recently wrote an article, which I think we talked about before, about why we need more Black women in tech, specifically in micromobility, and why it's relevant, which was received to a mixed response on LinkedIn. But I did start with those facts and some of the research that's out there around how, you know, your bottom line, your finances for the business are going to be improved by improving your diversity. And I think if people can at least understand on that level why it's important, you know, that there's not really a lot of arguing with that. But then also, you know, it's not just that, you know, it's just a simple thing of what is the right and moral thing to do in your business. It is making sure that it's open to people of all walks of life, and that should be enough on its own.
Definitely. And on that, I will make sure the link is shared with this video so that people get a second chance to read it. And I think it's evident talking to you, and I'm sure everyone watching and listening will see that you love working in mobility, and it's something that you're very passionate about. What is it that you love? What is it that drives you?
I do. I mean, I think it's just such an incredible industry because it does have that intersection of so many other industries. So you're working in the green space and green tech, but you're also working in transport, and you have private business working with the public domain and public organizations like local authorities that you're working with. So you have a very mixed bag of experiences in your day-to-day. Like, no single day is the same as another, which is great. And then, you know, just in terms of the opportunity that there is in micromobility, it's an industry that has the potential to really impact the way that we live our lives and how we treat the planet and how we treat ourselves and our health, our mental health, our physical health. So the impact is that you can achieve within micromobility is huge. And then if you look at the impact that micromobility has made so far, one of my favorite references about micromobility is that it's actually the fastest growing tech ever. So if you look at, if you kind of chart all of the interesting tech developments like ATMs or mobile phones on a chart of 0 to 100, I think it's 100 million users actually, bike share reaches it insanely faster than any other tech that's ever been kind of developed. So as much as, you know, it's old technology, the bicycle, it's the modern form of, you know, bike sharing service that is operated app-based and uses IoT connectivity and all of this great stuff. It's really the fastest to reach that goal ever. And then you have companies that are doing that on a global scale, or doing it on a local level, national level, and the impact that you see every day for the things that you're doing within that space. So we've run campaigns recently. For example, during the pandemic, we ran a campaign, or in fact, an initiative where all NHS staff, all types of key workers, it was different kind of formats in different services depending on how we were set up, but basically had access to free rides during the pandemic so that they could travel in safe and socially distanced ways and even just get a break every now and again, clear your head. We had lots of people reporting back to us that's how they used it. But you see that direct impact, and in the end that was like, I think we managed to support 10,000 free rides through that single initiative. And that was born out of, you know, day one when we had no non-essential travel. We were thinking, well, what can we do now? How do we actually continue to support our communities, have a good service? And that was just born out of being, you know, having a chat with our CEO and saying, well, we feel like this would be the right thing to do. We're talking to all the right people. We're working with the NHS trusts. We're connected with the council. Why don't we just see if we can get this in front of the right people? And it's ended up with 10,000 trips taking place and supporting people for those really essential journeys that were taking place during that period. some of the feedback that we've had from people there is just amazing. So it's, yeah, having that direct connection to the impact that you're making on the world through that business, and then all the exposure that you get across all these different exciting and interesting industries as well. Anyway, yeah, could talk for a while about it, it turns out.
No, it's good. It's great to be passionate about what you do, and I think it's fairly evident that you are. So going, I guess it kind of leads perfectly into the next question is, what exciting opportunities are ahead?
A lot. I mean, I think, you know, now is a really, really interesting time to be in this industry hugely. Especially in the UK, there's a real change in the landscape. There's a change in the funding that's available. There's a change in attitudes towards cycling. You know, we've come through this pandemic, and it's been really, really visible and really clear what a positive impact cycling and more cycling can play on our society, on our recovery, right? It's a strange thing because up until quite recently, it's been such a polarizing topic, cycling. Like, you would think it's so obvious, you know, like cycling is good for your health, it's good for the planet, you know, why be against it? But it's a really polarizing topic for some reason. And it tends to be spoken about in the media or in the public in really black and white terms, like I like cyclists or I don't like cyclists, and it's always this kind of one image of a cyclist, the kind of lycra wearing cyclist thing, which is great. Like, it's great to be that type of cyclist, but there's also a million other types of cyclists out there. I personally don't wear lycra, but I do like to ride a bike. So, you know, it's interesting to see this real change in temperature and the way that people are talking about cycling even. But then with that, there's all this funding that's suddenly become available, and all this recognition that actually encouraging active travel and encouraging socially distant forms of travel and healthy forms of travel has a really important role to play in our recovery. So it's such an interesting time with that. And then, you know, we also have all of this great innovation happening. E-scooters, they have been around for a while. They haven't been allowed into the UK. Now we're coming up to this point where we're going to be allowed to do e-scooter trials. We're partnering with people to do that. You know, new vehicle types, e-bikes coming through. People are paying attention to making their services more accessible and more equitable for the communities that they're in. The conversation around Black Lives Matter has had a lot of impact in this industry as well. You know, people are really starting to pay attention. Are we representative? Are we providing a service that is really accessible for everybody in the communities that we serve? So I do think it's a hugely interesting time to be in mobility. It's still a really young industry, actually. You know, this kind of big boom of the free floating model that came out of China and then grew in the US as well, and was kind of starting to seep in here. This has only been around for like 3 years, really, overall, which is mind-boggling. Or at least it's been in the UK and in the US for around that time, a little bit longer if we look to Asia. But yeah, it's a really young industry, and a lot has changed in a really, really short period of time. You know, this industry has grown unicorns, it's lost unicorns, and it's changed in trajectory. You know, at one point it was free floating is the way, and now I think there's a lot more understanding of how you actually bring partnership and collaboration with the city and feed it into the wider transport planning and hybrid services like Beryl, how those actually might be more equitable and beneficial for our communities. So yeah, I if anyone is thinking about getting into micromobility, now is the time.
And funnily enough, that is the last question.
Oh, there you go.
What is your advice to either the next generation or people doing something different at the moment, about how they can make that leap into mobility? And I think also, how should that reflect the communities that these companies operate in?
Yeah, I think it's funny, when we were kind of talking about this, I was like, my answer to this is going to sound so corny, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's really true. I think you just have to believe in what you're doing. This industry is so fast paced and is constantly changing and moving. And, you know, I've said no one day is like to another. There's a huge amount of pressure in some of your days. There's lots of enjoyment in others. You could be working very late nights, but if you believe in what you're doing and you have the connection impact that it's going to make, then it will carry you through and you'll really get a lot out of it. And with that, you know, we've mentioned it's a really young industry. There aren't a lot of experts in this space. It's not about having 10 years of experience in micromobility whatsoever. It's about having that passion and then applying your skills to the industry. I think a lot of people look at kind of tech, which micromobility does kind of fall under that tech umbrella, or even coming from the more traditional side of micromobility, coming from maybe transport backgrounds or transport planners. People think that there's like a kind of one size fits into those categories, and actually you don't need to be a techie to work in tech. I'm not particularly a techie. I kind of fell into tech in DevOps, which is like real techie tech, like cloud computing at the beginning, but working on the business side, working in marketing, working in growth, partnerships, that kind of area, and applying my skills to the industry, and then just kind of gaining experience in who I was working with and picking things up. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, you know, don't think too much into like, I don't have experience in a micromobility company. I think if micromobility companies are hiring and they're only looking for that, they're going to be missing out on some serious talent, and then you can come to Beryl because really it's about the skills that you have and how you apply them to something that you care about. And ultimately, I think in any industry, if you in any role, if you think about it in that way, you're going to end up doing something that you love, and then you're going to end up doing a pretty good job, I imagine.
Amazing. Well, your passion for the industry is certainly inspiring. So hopefully that will go a little bit extra in terms of getting the next generation applying and seeing what an amazing impact they can have and how exciting it is to have a career in mobility. So that brings us to the end of today's session. It was a pleasure talking to you as always, and thank you for being a part of the series.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. I really appreciate it. It's good to chat with you as well. And I'm really excited about this whole series. You know, I think you've said you're going to be talking to some amazing people. So I'll definitely be watching and paying attention. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.